So I'll ask you, because you would probably have this better than I would. I thought I heard Chip Kelly today say that Jason Peters was not going to practice. Did he lie?
First quote of the press conference, Jason Peters will not practice. Then we walk over to the practice bubble, and he's got his helmet, and he's taped up, and he's going to practice. So as Chip says, he's not a doctor, so I guess that's his out. But it's not a good look that the head coach doesn't know his all-pro left tackle is going to practice. So I've often questioned the whole mentality of having press conferences before practice and not after practice. This is another example of why. Who knows why he didn't know? He probably just did trainers and assumed he wouldn't be ready, but it makes you look bad.
Well, you would think with the questions that he gets, which are very much injury-related sometimes, and he says, I don't know, I have to talk to the trainers. Maybe after the third year of having to tell everybody that, he would meet with the trainers before he goes to the podium. Would that be something that maybe someone as smart as Chip Kelly might come up with?
Well, for a guy who wants to portray himself as the smartest guy in the room, you don't look like the smartest guy in the room when you don't have information. So, again, in the larger picture, it's not that big of a deal. I think the bigger aspect is that Jason Peters might be able to play, and that's important for the Philadelphia Eagles. But as far as Chip Kelly and the season he's going through, this is just another one of those little things that keep adding up and say, maybe this guy doesn't have enough time to do all this or whatever, but it just doesn't look good. And the optics come across as a guy who doesn't understand what's going on the team, and that's a little bit of an issue.
Well, and he was asked, what are they telling you? And he said that he has a bad back and he can't practice today. So apparently someone did tell him beforehand the condition of his player.
It was a definitive statement. There was no open-ended aspect to it. It was definitely definitive. He said he wasn't going to practice. And as soon as we got down there, he was ready to practice. And interestingly, after it, which tells you even more, I talked to Matt Tobin in the locker room after. He thought Jason Peters was in the entire practice. And then the injury report comes out.
It's unbelievable.
It says that Jason Peters is limited. And they're playing on the same offensive line. Now, granted, Tobin's a right guard, Peters is a left tackle, and evidently Lane Johnson took some reps at left tackle. And then you go back to last week, Mike. Lane Johnson didn't know he was going to play left tackle in the game until right before kickoff, according to Lane. So we talk about, is he losing this locker room? For the first time today, I get the sense maybe he's losing this locker room.
Well, and, we talk about continuity on the offensive line, and now you're just telling me that Matt Tobin doesn't know who lined up next to him for half the practice? I mean, that kind of sounds ridiculous.
Well, I think he does. I think that's the point. I mean, it is, right guard versus left tackle, but you know who's out there. And it tells me that the majority of the time, and Matt's very open, he's always willing to talk, and it tells me that Peters was out there for the majority of the time, and that's a good thing for the Eagles. The fact that he was listed as limited, I don't know if that was to save face for Chip because he said he wasn't going to practice. I wish I could tell you definitively what's going on, but half the people don't know. So it's very difficult. It's just an issue where I've said for a long time, Chip Kelly doesn't take seriously this aspect of his job, and that's fine. But it is his conduit to the fan base, and it's not a big deal to us because, as I said, it's just, 10 minutes later we can walk over into the practice bubble because it was raining today, and we saw he was going to practice. So I don't know why he would be trying to be disingenuous with us. I just didn't think he knew, and that's an issue of the head coach of a football team because that's one of your best 2 or 3 players. So it would be nice if you knew what his status was.
Well, and he was asked about why he takes such a hands-off approach with his players, and, of course, he gives you this cocky answer of, like, I'm not a medical doctor, but, he says, I think it would be very foolish for me to say, yeah, I don't think he has a concussion, go back on the field. He says, I think it's kind of preposterous. However, you would think that he would want as much information on his player as he can possibly get, right?
Well, you would think, and he's done that before. You know, this is a guy who his whole philosophy is based on these little things that give him an advantage over other teams and other organizations, whether it involves nutrition or sleep studies. It's all these things that other people supposedly don't think about that give this Eagles team a slight edge. That's the theory. That's the mindset he sold to Jeffrey Lurie to get all this power. And then you look at this, and that's the exact opposite. You're right. I mean, information is power. And we all know that in every aspect of my life, not just football. You want to have as much information as humanly possible when you have to talk in front of people. And for whatever reason, Chip Kelly didn't have that information.
John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com, is with us. You know, there has some report out there that says there's no way Bradford plays this week or next week. Chip Kelly today said that the concussion is the number one thing. Yesterday there was a report that his shoulder is separated, but he wants to play. Is this game getting interesting with Bradford? This a little behind-the-scenes game starting to get interesting?
A little bit. I've said from the start, I agree with that. I don't think there's any way he plays the next two games. I'll put one caveat on that. If they play just tremendously poorly and Sanchez turns it over 4 times against Tampa, yeah, I think he could be back in there on Thanksgiving. But I think he wants to see Mark Sanchez in this offense, and I've said it from the start. This is his out. And, yeah, Sam Bradford wants to play because he wants to earn a contract, whether it's here or somewhere else next season. So that's the dichotomy that's going on. And yeah, separated shoulder sounds bad, but it's his non-throwing shoulder. So plenty of quarterbacks have played with that injury in the past. He could certainly play with that injury. So the concussion is the bigger issue. Now, that is independent, but we've all talked about the NFL as a whole, and this isn't just the Eagles. It seems to me, from covering this league for a long time, star players tend to get through that concussion protocol a little bit quicker. And the NFL might not like that, but that's the reality of the situation. And I'm not saying that's the case with Sam Bradford, but if there's any opportunity for Chip Kelly to pump the brakes here in that protocol, I think he's doing it because I think he wants to get a look at Mark Sanchez in this offense.
John, let me ask you this. I had said earlier, and it kind of bothers me, you know, John Dorenbos has, 2 bad snaps in his entire career, and they bring in 2 guys to try to take his job on Monday, which I think is kind of ridiculous. I mean, come on. The guy's been a Pro Bowler. He had a bad snap. Miles Austin and Riley Cooper could be the 2 worst receivers in the league. Have they brought in anybody to open their eyes like, you know what, maybe I'm not doing a great job, and they're looking at other guys? Like, you know, I'm not saying you got to sign Welker or Hakeem Nicks, but 2 guys that at least have a high profile to say, they brought a couple players in here. I better start doing my job better. Dorenbos has 1 bad snap in his life, and they bring 2 guys in there. I think that's pretty ridiculous.
Well, I agree with you on the wide receiver part. It's far from John understands. He talked about it the other day. I mean, that's
and I thought Dorenbos handled it well, and I think that you know, it's okay, but it's saying that he has 1 bad snap, and we're bringing in guys to take his job. You 2 guys haven't had a catch in about 4 weeks if you're Cooper, and, you know, you could throw Huff into that mix too, and we're not bringing anybody in here. You guys are A-okay. Everything's fine. I think that sends a bad precedence.
Well, I'm going to defend the Eagles for once. I disagree with you, and I think John will admit he has not had a good year snapping football, and certainly not up to his standard. And it's more than 1 bad snap. In that game, he had 3 bad snaps. It doesn't always result in a missed field goal. It doesn't always result in a blocked punt. But even if it's off a little bit, it could result in a bad punt, a shank of a field goal. So he knows he hasn't been performing up to what he has before. And that's what happens with long snappers in this league. It's not just the Eagles. But on the other side of the coin, I agree with you. And other than bringing in Jonathan Krause to the practice squad, the Eagles haven't looked outside this organization for receivers that could help in the here and now. And you're right. I mean, I don't understand it, especially in Miles Austin's case. And it's interesting because, if anything, if he continues to play poorly, And you could argue worse and worse each week. He keeps getting more and more reps because he's the only receiver Sam Bradford trusts, and that tells you a lot about the other guy.
Awful. Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that, but, St. Louis, they bring Welker in. The Giants have brought Nix back. I'm not saying that you needed to sign those guys, but you bring in guys who have some pedigree in this league. I think you open the eyes of some guys to at least take a look at themselves in the mirror to say, is it me that's not doing a good job? Maybe I need to step my game up. Maybe it's just a scare tactics all that's needed. I'm not saying that, Welker is a better player than this guy, but I certainly think his name rings, has a little bit of credibility behind it to put a little bit of a scare into some of these guys.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily about to figure because he's got the concussion issues and he only plays the slot, and that's the one position where you don't need an upgrade. Well, you probably do, but they're not looking for one with Jordan Matthews. So he's not a particular fit for this team. But there's other guys like Chris Matthews, who's just the Super Bowl hero, is just cut by the Seahawks. See, that's a young player who possibly has potential. So, Nix isn't going to help you. Welker's not going to help you. I don't have an issue with them not bringing in players like that. But there's got to be people on teams like that. There's got to be people on practice squads around this league that have an upside. The Vikings did it last year with Charles Johnson, who's a pretty good receiver. They pilfered him off Cleveland's practice squad. You can do that, and I haven't seen any evidence that the Eagles have made moves in that direction. They should be. They should be rolling players in here to try to improve this roster, and it would certainly start at the wide receiver position because a guy like Austin, you could cut him tomorrow. It's not going to hurt your salary cap. You've already paid all this money in the signing bonus, and you should be trying to improve that position.
Well, and it would be the same. It sounds like you're picking on just the wide receivers, but and you would probably know this better than I would, but I don't know that they've brought linemen in. Are there any veteran linemen that are, just kind of hanging around out there that nobody wanted to pay money? Has anybody come in for a workout? Because, quite frankly, it seems like the linemen are getting a pass. Like, hey, you're doing a good enough job. We're not bringing anybody in here to kind of to take a look at. It seems like the only guys who are getting their jobs kind of pressured is the kicker and the long snapper.
Well, they do bring in guys for workouts, and a lot of times it's not publicized because they don't give us the names, and obviously we can't tell by the faces. But every team in the NFL brings in players, usually on Mondays
right,
to work out to keep, in case of injuries more than anything else. It's not even necessarily to push guys on the roster. You just want to do your due diligence and get people. And if something does happen, this guy looked pretty good. So the Eagles do that, but every NFL team does that. But, yeah, as far as actually going to players that haven't been performing, like a Miles Austin or a Josh Huff or something like that, certainly they don't feel like their jobs are in jeopardy. And maybe that's not a good thing because they perform so poorly, they should be being pushed. And a lot of it, in Huff's case, obviously, it's a young player who was a high draft choice, so there's a comfort level in that. In Austin, it's he's the one veteran receiver. He knows the quarterback likes him, so there's comfort level in that. But the group as a whole hasn't performed, and they should be trying to, even if it's Freddie Martino or Krause you should be trying to sort of juggle things and shake things up.
No doubt, and I agree, especially when a team is struggling and has a core of positions struggling. It's not one guy struggling. You got multiple guys, and I don't know that it hurts to say, look, we're bringing a guy in, and that should open your eyes to say, hey, maybe it's me. That's a little bit of the problem. John McMullen's with us. DeMarco Murray, some interesting things. He seemed to indicate, John, that he thinks the running game might be better off with Mark Sanchez running this offense.
So does everyone. I mean, that's it. That's the whole thing. The people who think Mark Sanchez is better equipped to run this offense, it's for one reason. It's because he has some mobility. Not that he's Russell Wilson or somebody like that, but you can't, as a defense, go into a game with Mark Sanchez and assume that he's not going to take 4 or 5 yards because he'll do it. Sam Bradford would not do that. He's not comfortable enough in his knees, and he's not athletic enough, despite what they were trying to sell before the season. And you've taken those zone read looks off the table. They're back on the table with Mark Sanchez, and that improves the running game. And DeMarco Murray's 100% right. Now they have to, this week, hopefully they're working on those handoffs because they certainly looked herky-jerky when he came in mid-game, and hopefully that will improve. But if that improves, this running game's going to be better with Mark Sanchez. I agree with him 100%.
John's got 5 on the Bucs up right now at 97.3 ESPN.com. 5 things you should look at with this Tampa Bay team, plus his pick for the game. So if you want to check out what that is, check out the website right now. Give us a little rundown on Tampa Bay. This is a team that had the number 1 pick in the draft last year, which means they were the worst team in the league. How much have they improved?
Well, a lot. I mean, think about it. They were 2-14 last year, and already they got 4 wins in 9 games. They have the exact same record as the Eagles. So they've doubled up their win total in basically half a season. Jameis Winston is going to be a star in this league. I said that from day one. If he kept his nose clean, and those were some serious issues, his off-the-field problems at Florida State. But he is a really, really talented, traditional quarterback. That's the key. None of this zone read nonsense, none of this one read. He's a progression guy. Now, he's like every young quarterback. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to throw interceptions. All young quarterbacks do that, but you can see he learns from his mistakes. He's a natural leader. He's a natural pocket passer. With mobility added into that, he's going to be a star in this league, and this is just the start of it for Tampa Bay.
And he's got a great receiver in Evans. I mean, that's a guy who's a beast. He's a big physical receiver. Martin's a nice running back over there. Anthony Beck told us yesterday that one big difference he looks at the Eagles and the Tampa Bay, he thinks is in the trenches. He thinks their offensive line is a pretty good offensive line where Philadelphia struggles.
Yeah, certainly the last couple of weeks, and that's where Jason Peters helps because the Eagles are a much better offensive line with Jason at left tackle and Lane at right tackle. So you have to keep looking at how that develops and hope that Jason Peters doesn't have a setback the rest of the weekend, and hopefully he'll be out there. To me, the bigger issue is on the other side of the ball. This is the second straight week now that the Eagles are facing a team that has a great under tackle, great 3-technique defensive tackle. This time it's Gerald McCoy. You saw what Ndamukong Suh did to him last week. Unless there's some changes, unless they figure it out, they're going to have similar issues because McCoy's, if he's not as good as Suh, he's probably 1B to his 1A.
Yikes. All right, that game, of course, Sunday here at the Link. And, of course, you can listen to the game on 97.3 ESPN. Tampa Bay in town against the Philadelphia Eagles, who, of course, will try to get themselves with a win back to first place in the NFC East, the very powerful NFC East. All right, John, we'll get your pick for the game tomorrow. If you want to take a look at it right now, it's on our website, 97.3ESPN.com. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Mike.